We are at the 10 after the hour, so hopefully folks have made their way back from their break. Hopefully all had a good break. We are now transitioning into our next phase of the program, the panel. My name is Will, and I serve as a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist in the Forest Service, and I will be serving today as your moderator. Just a few logistical notes before we jump in. If you feel like participating in the chat, please feel free to do so. We're going to try to have some time for Q&A at the end, but please, throughout, feel free to toss questions, comments, and or concerns in the chat. Again, thank you so much for being here. Our panelists will introduce themselves via the first question. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So the first question, and this goes to all panelists today, if you could please also introduce yourself with this first question, that'd be awesome. So the first question is, how did you get into your line of work?
Nobody want to go first?
Maybe I'll jump in here. Hearing the crickets. We're all like so shy. We're like, no, I don't want to go first. I don't. Okay. So I'll be that person. So my name is Sarah Hopeland. I'm really happy to be here today. I work with the Forest Service. I'm based at the Missoula Fire Sciences Lab. So me and all my colleagues play with fire, but in a safe way. But yeah, so I mainly work in the research and development branch of the Forest Service. But how I got into my line of work in the agency is actually I was at an ACES conference, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and hopefully some of the students out there listening know of that organization. But yeah, I was just a student kind of walking around the career fair, and I had talked to the NRCS, and I had kind of was making my way through with my little resume, and sure enough, I saw the Forest Service booth, and ended up talking to some of the folks there about the work that they were doing. And at the ACES conference, it's a great location where you can sort of get your name out. And at that conference, I ended up interviewing for a job. And so that was sort of my first position with the agency, and that was back in 2010. So that's kind of how I got started.
All right, I can jump in next. Afternoon, everybody, folks. Latasha Wanika Anderson. I've been here throughout the whole webinar, but how I got into the agency is very similar to how Sarah got into the agency as well. I actually went to not necessarily a conference, but a career fair at one of the tribal colleges here in the Southwest area. And lo and behold, there was a USDA booth there, and there was the diversity inclusion department, recruitment department. And, you know, I was just curious in all the visuals that they have with the logo and everything. I was like, I wonder what this is. So just talked to them, asked questions, and they were talking about all these programs, all these types of positions and careers involved with the department and the different agencies. And so I brought my resume with me because there weren't as many career fairs going on in my neck of the woods. So I would try to be prepared as best I could. So I gave them a copy of my resume, talked to them about my college experience, the education, etc., what I would be interested in. And they gave me a card, and of course, they have my contact information. And about 2 weeks after that event, I got an email from the lady I was talking to about the different programs, and she heard about internship programs, more third party. And she sent me the flyer, and it was an internship with Mobilize Green, who's a nonprofit based out of DC, and their focus was getting it on diversity within federal agencies in the greener, sustainable realm side of things. And so with that, I applied. They were hiring 10 to 11 interns at the time, and they put us each in all the regions to get experience with the volunteer coordination side of things. And so that was my very first introduction to the Forest Service and the volunteer service program, which kind of pretty much led me to this position right now. So.
I'll go ahead and go next. My name is Crystal Langley. Sorry, computer. My name is Crystal Langley. I go by KK, and I currently serve as a sub-regional volunteer and service program specialist covering the states of Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. I came into the Forest Service kind of uniquely, I guess you would say, for the times. back in 2008, I had graduated with my bachelor's, and I was trying to figure out that next step, and had discovered forestry. Yes, I was a senior in college before I realized forestry even existed, and had gotten accepted for grad school. And there was a program at the time called the Career Intern Program, and you had to be a current student. And it just so happened that the National Forest in Texas was looking to fill one of those program positions, and it was done a little differently now. Like USA Jobs is where everything goes now, so make sure your resume is up to snuff on everything. But at the same time, back then, like Latasha said, you had your resume with you in hand. You went in to meet with people, and they walked me through the process of applying through this specialized portal. And then about a month and a half later, I heard I got hired, and then my start date was a month after that. And so I came into the agency as a GS5 rec tech. And I used to laugh. People were like, "You got your degree so you could go clean restrooms." And I was like, basically, but there was a lot more to it. It was learning from the ground up exactly what went into a district, managing the rec areas. And that was back in 2009. And so, and since then, just very colorful career since. So loving every moment.
I guess I'll go next. Aloha ava kea, everybody. My name is Marley Smith. My story actually begins when I was younger. I'm a Kanaka Maori that extends from the Waikiki and Santiago lines of Hawaii, but I was born and raised on a horse ranch in Sedalia, Colorado, right up against the Pike National Forest. That was my backyard. So the Forest Service has always been a part of my story. My grandparents were volunteer firefighters for the Pike National Forest and still are. And so they kind of gave me a taste of land management, but I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go with that until I did an internship in Hawaii. When I was going to school down there for my Hawaiian Studies degree, I landed a forestry internship that was basically voluntary until I showed them I was willing and ready to do all this work. So I started with the Department of Land and Natural Resources. And I worked in their nursery and greenhouse, and I realized I loved forestry. This is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So, fortunately, Colorado State University is known for its forestry program, so I was able to return home. And when I got into school, I hustled, and I got to be the U.S. Forest Service student ambassador for the college and the Department of Forest and Rangeland Stewardship. And through that, I was able to network with different entities across private, nonprofit, and state and Forest Service and other federal agencies. Realized that Forest Service was where it was at. And I got a lot of other research opportunities as well. I got to do handwork or collaboration work between the university, Fish and Wildlife, and the Institute of Pacific Island Forestry, which is a research station tied to the Forest Service in Hawaii. And all of that led to an opportunity I land as a resource assistant program intern. I think in 2020, right before the pandemic started. And that eventually led to my permanent position here on the Santa Fe National Forest as a natural resource specialist on the Pecos Las Vegas Ranger District. So I've had a lot of things lead me to this space in the agency, and I enjoy every minute. My job is extremely interdisciplinary, which is just how I like it. And I've been able to perform different aspects of Malama Aina in my job.
Waka, quick introduction. My name is Cody Kapadik. How I started my current full-time position as a civil engineer. I was offered the engineering internship, and I actually turned it down the first time because the HR representative told me I had 48 hours to make a decision. I had another interview at the end of the week. Asked current supervisor if that'd be okay to get some extra time. He thought it would be okay. And then got a hold of the HR guy the next day because time difference between Alaska and New Mexico is a bit, bit of a change with the, with I think it was 2 or 3 hours ahead. So got a hold of him. He said, nope, you had 48 hours. That's pretty much now. So I said, all right, well, I respectfully decline. And he was kind of flustered. I said, all right, have a good day. He said, you too. And I called my current supervisor back, told him what happened, or left a voicemail because I think he was busy trying to scramble to find other interviewees because I think he was kind of set on hiring me at the time, which is nice thought. But then he asked me if I was really interested in the position, and I said, yeah. I just wanted to weigh my options because I actually had intern options that year. He said, take the week, take a few days, go to your other interview. If you come with us, great. If not, that's okay too. And then, I did the internship for 2 years, 2 summers full time, doing the semester part time. Very flexible. It was the first internship that I had that actually I accumulated annual and sick leave right out the gate. So that was really nice. So nice benefit for students. If you consider future with federal, you start accumulating intern or leave. For others, you don't get many benefits at all. And then, so that was a NTE, not to exceed, temporary 1-year internship that it got extended for each year until I got into a position my supervisor created, the pathways to conversion. And then that got me to the full-time civil engineer job after I graduated with my bachelor's in civil engineering. And then I followed on shortly after that. While working full-time, I finished my master's in project management.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing how your career started in a lot of different ways that folks have come into the agency. We're all very happy to have all of y'all here. The next question kind of deals with not necessarily focused just in the beginning, but more kind of the nuts and bolts of what you're doing in your day-to-day. So the question is, and this is for 2, 3 of you, more if you feel like it, but the question is, how does your work impact, affect, or interact with Indigenous communities and relationships?
Y'all are good. I saw head nods. So in my role as a volunteer and service program specialist, I get to work with our local and partnering tribes. So any tribes that partner with our local forest or that have tribal interest areas, whether they're ancestral homelands or they travel through the area to their settlements now, and or tribes that we consult with about the resources that we manage. And so with our, I'm Alabama Kashada. It's a small tribe here in Texas. And I'm going to use them as an example for this. Something that we had always dreamed about was creating a YCC program that engaged tribal youth on the local forest that the tribe has ancestral values and connections to, and manage the resources that are still culturally significantly important to the tribe. So like longleaf pine needle for our basketry, some of the plants that they use for medicinal purposes. And we created a pilot program with one of our service partners, which is American Youth Works. And the partner employed the youth from the tribe. They did a focused recruitment to just pull youth from this community. And then the forest and I worked together to develop a scope of work that would allow them to engage in every discipline area and do projects that are meaningful to the tribe, that they could take that knowledge back to their people and utilize it here on our tribal lands, or look into if they want to study that in the future. And so that's a prime example of seeing, when I say I had a colorful career, I've worked in every discipline area at some point in time, but I truly value the position I'm in now because it's making those connections that I longed for when I first came into the agency. I wanted to see people that look like me, that I could get advice from or seek these types of opportunities through. And now I'm hopefully doing that for the current younger generation of our people as they come in and they see me at a career fair and they're like, oh, she's one of our tribal members, like she's doing this for real. And making those connections for them is an awesome thing for us to see in place now.
So in engineering, at least from my position, there's not a whole lot of interaction with tribes or native peoples. There might be some where there's some land projects that go over some native land or in partnership with some tribes or corporate Alaska Native corporations, since that's how they operate in Alaska. But I'm an ANSEP alumni, that's Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program. And then I also stay involved with ACES, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. And since I was an intern and since I've converted to full time, I've been kind of the ad hoc intern lead mentor for ANSEP interns, vets work interns, other temporary employees that come through, and just kind of help guide them through it all. And so I stay involved with programs like ANSEP and ACES, and kind of like what you're saying, that's a bit more of my passion area. So I'm looking into those partnership coordinator positions, specifically in Alaska, so that I can do more of that. Because before, when I was first started as an intern, I had no idea that we had tribal type employees or tribal liaison type employees. So I got really excited about that, since that's where a lot of us are from, and care about those types of communities.
Maybe I'll go next here. Just really appreciate everyone's comments so far on all these responses, but Goatsi, greetings everyone. I forgot to introduce myself and my tribal affiliation, but my family's from the Pueblo of Laguna in New Mexico, but my position today is based up in Montana. And it's pretty unique with the work that I get to do with the Forest Service. My office is not based in a research station or on a national forest or anything. My office is actually based at the tribal college there on the Flathead Indian Reservation in northwestern Montana. So the Forest Service does have a presence at some tribal colleges and universities. And the way I get to work with tribes in my position is I kind of like to describe it in 3 bins. The first bin is obviously I get to work real closely with a lot of the Native students there at Salish Kootenai College, which is probably my favorite part of my job. We have students in hydrology and forestry, and then also in wildlife management that I get to advise and mentor. And so just helping that kind of next generation of Native scholars either pursue graduate level work or maybe take a position with the agency, or, you know, help them go back home and work for their own tribes. But doing that work with the Native students is by far like the coolest stuff I get to do. And I love spending time with them and their families. The other kind of bin too that I get to do is conduct primary research. And so I did go to Northern Arizona University, and that's where I finished my PhD in forestry, but the Forest Service paid for it. It was so cool. And so keep in mind, like if you're considering going on for a graduate level degree, that the Forest Service has, and I think we had mentioned this in some of the previous conversations, but we have what's called the continuing service agreement. And so the agency was able to sort of recruit me as a scientist and pay for my tuition. And then I got to work in the summers, as Cody was mentioning, accruing that time in grade and all that stuff, and things like leave and all those great benefits. So the Forest Service, as well as the NRCS and other federal agencies, have great programs like that. So anyways, I get to do primary research, but mainly I get to work with tribal communities addressing tribal research needs. The main research project that I get to run is working with the Mexican spotted owl, which is, here's my painting in the background of it. And I get to work with the Mescalero Apache tribe. And so I spend a lot of the summer out there hooting for owls, because that helps the tribe with their management. And then my other bin is I feel fortunate to sort of work on intertribal partnerships and collaboration type stuff. So kind of complex in that way, but yeah, I like some of the other panelists have mentioned, I really enjoy working for the Forest Service. And I think like our connection that we have to the land, it makes it a real like easy, we have that shared dedication and that commitment to the resources that I think the agency can really benefit from. So those are my responses. Thanks.
Marley, did you have something on this? I saw you coming off mute before.
I did. And I appreciate you acknowledging me trying to get in this space. So the work that I do, I mean, I'm in a very unique space when it comes to working with Indigenous communities because I'm in a pretty predominant and historically significant area for the ancestral lands for many Indigenous communities, whether that's Puebloan communities, other different tribal communities, and even the local community that has Indigenous ties to this land and has easy access to this land or easier access to this land than some of our Indigenous communities here. So, however, the district that I'm on didn't have direct ties or connections or permanent connections to those Indigenous communities. So I've made it a real effort to involve those Indigenous voices in this space for healing work and to reignite that connection to this landscape. I see it as a cultural responsibility to my cousins across the wire, right, to help support that that work necessary to heal the landscape and to create opportunities and make sure that the voices that need to be at the table are at the table when it comes to land management and specifically natural resource management. So I try to lead from where I'm at and develop these spaces to support our local and Indigenous youth here, because all the work that I do impacts our connection and the resource itself for the generations to come after. So that's all I was trying to say. My work is pretty extensive when it comes to involving Indigenous communities. I've had a lot of support from my supervisors and from my team to push these narratives forward as well. And that has allowed me to do the work that I want to do and that I'm passionate about in this agency, which is definitely a key factor in my ability to do the work and to stimulate the passion that I have in the work that I do.
Just want to tag in along all of the above. Tying in everybody's responses, yes, exactly the same way, whether it be outreaching, recruitment, land management, co-stewardship responsibilities, and also kind of getting involved with the aspect of the funding opportunities and making sure that our Forest Service leadership are in the loop of the connections that we have in order for us to start that conversation or to continue that conversation.
Awesome. Next question. Actually, before we continue, Dr. Hoagland, you mentioned that you are hooting for owls. Could you please explain that process?
Yeah, sure. So the Mexican spotted owl is a threatened species. So their populations are pretty limited. And right now, the biggest threat to the species is high severity stand replacing wildfire. And what's unique with the tribe that I get to work with is they've really figured out that balance between still providing habitat for the owl for its nest and for its fledglings and stuff, but then also reducing fire risk. So they've done a fair amount of active forest management around their owl sites. So yeah, the reason we go out and hoot for them is because they're territorial during the nesting season. And so we'll mimic their territorial call. And it's pretty neat. They call back if they're there. So yeah, we use that monitoring protocol to survey for them and see if they're still occupying sites that have gone through some sort of forest treatment or thinning or burning, things like that. So yeah, the owl stuff is really exciting. And actually in the chat, I was going to post a link for the Native American Research Assistantship Program. I host a Native American student intern every summer to tag along and hoot and hike in the forest. So I'll put that link in the chat right now. It is from last year, but they'll update it for next year. Thanks for asking that.
Sure, we've got some of the coolest people doing the coolest jobs in the Forest Service. Next question. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Next question is, as you kind of reflect back on your time in college, whether that's your undergraduate, graduate, PhD, was one of the most important things that you took out of college that's helping you now?
So I'll jump in here because I only have my bachelor's degree, and it's been a couple years since I've been in school, so it's a little fresh in my mind. When I was going to college, it was really challenging, just because the way that my community interacts with its natural environment and understands science and stuff is very different than the academic college setting. And so I had to learn to stand my ground a lot, and it taught me a skill set to communicate across boundaries and borders. It taught me to critically think about what information is being fed to me through academia versus what's actually being implemented on the ground, which has highly benefited me in my work. I can be that bridge between the two worlds. And the connections that I made. It's really important to find a community in those spaces because college is hard. And I'm sure we all have a story about being an Indigenous individual in school and having it conflict with some of our ideals or our cultural practices and norms. And that community is what gets you through that day and gets you through the hard times. So I encourage that you find that space, the community members to help support you and who can meet you where you're at, whether that's through colleagues or professors or across boundaries, even outside of your department. And then it gives you a space to critically analyze and process the world that we live in today. There's so many things and so many different factors to consider, and college provides that space because it's forcing you to critically think about things, whether that's think about his theoretical forestry plan or learning the history of different communities. I know my ethnic studies really made me learn the social justice aspect of things and really appreciate the human side of our relationship with nature. Whereas my forestry program may not have emphasized that so much, but taught me the skills to understand what nature, how to process and how to understand what nature is doing in the current space of things, how to acknowledge the past, and then use that knowledge to plan for the future. Right. So college gives you different aspects, but you got to make it your own. It's not going to be handed to you. It definitely was not handed to me. I had to learn how to put my foot down and really had to figure out what path I wanted to take and take advantage of every opportunity that was thrown at me and utilize those opportunities towards my passion. So it's work. It's a lot of work and it takes a lot of energy. But I would say that for me, it gave me space to find myself. So.
I was just going to add to encourage students that anytime that you have applied study courses, to try to really engage yourself in those applied studies. In other words, not just the classes that focus on your book teachings and such, but the ones that actually put you in the field and get you some experience. Those are really valuable to understand quickly if that work is what you're cut out for. I say it in as nice a way as I can. There's some project work that you're going to get that's demanded of you in our agency that it might not be your cup of tea, and that's the perfect time for you to identify that early. And then another thing that I would encourage any students to do, and I know some universities have it, some don't, but if you can take interpretive courses, like courses about resource communications or resource interpretation or meeting facilitation. If you don't have specific courses on those, then even your sociology or like your philosophical courses where you have to give presentations, those will help you tremendously. I can't tell you how many times I've had to interpret a resource of some kind as a natural resource, but getting my fellow employees to understand it as a cultural resource because it's helped our tribal people maintain their traditions or their way of life for so many years. And so being able to take the interpretive courses helped me set up for being able to how to convey those things effectively, whether that's PowerPoints or orally, whatever that looks like. And then Latasha hit on it earlier. There's a set budget for everyone. Everyone's vying for funding or resources to get programs done. So you being able to facilitate or speak up confidently in front of others is a huge thing. I know for my people, traditionally, we used to be more of the listen, take it in, and not speak over others. But there's going to be times, and no matter what career path you go for, you would have to be able to convey your story, convey your needs for a program and such, especially if it's valuable and you're passionate about it. But being able to do that in, like I said, a confident manner without being over exaggerating or anything like that it's very important. So those classes have helped me day in and day out, especially when we're in this setting in front of a computer and not hearing or seeing the emotions or the actual passion in person. It helps a lot to be able to communicate effectively in facilitating or raising discussions with others.
You got time for one more, Will? Or all right.
Go for it,
yeah,
Cody.
yeah. It's kind of like what you mentioned. As a student, I didn't think I'd be doing what I do for work as an engineer. I thought I'd be doing design, calculations, everything. I do contract administration, kind of set up and facilitate work to be done. But again, it's significant. It's important. And then failing, it can feel not good. It can suck, but I've started over many times as far as jobs and careers and throughout life. But it'll all be okay. And then the other thing I know, or at least I feel like I can confidently say that a lot of us may feel like or experience that we are the first or the only ones in our respective offices. I know I'm the only Alaska Native in my current office. There was one before, but she just retired 2 years ago. And but hopefully, with all this good stuff and work we're doing, then we're not the last ones, or we'll bring more on like we're trying to do.
So for students who may be listening right now, hopefully folks have heard about your work, kind of what you're doing. If somebody was interested in your line of work or the line of work of the Forest Service, how would you recommend they try it out or kind of poke their toes in the water, I guess?
I can go on that. I didn't really kind of get into the details of my history with the Forest Service, but this pretty much lines right in well with it. So if folks want to try it out, I'd highly recommend checking out volunteer opportunities in your local area with the Forest Service, getting with the local volunteer coordinator, and we can provide that resource to you all, just so that you can get a better sense of what all types of programs, careers are involved, and you could go in and actually have hands-on experience with it. And another route I want folks to explore are the internship opportunities. We heard about them all throughout this morning, the third party folks doing theirs. And then for me, I got in through an internship, and this was way before the Public Land Corps and the Resource Assistance Program came into play. It was back in 2012. They really wanted to engage youth to have that kind of that spark and that rejuvenation of like our thoughts, our processes on how we should engage youth, how we should be doing kind of work nowadays with this new generation. And so I feel that the internships, whether it be PLC, whether it be resource assistant, getting your foot in that door, applying for those positions, which you work for the Forest Service, but you also work with a partner organization, usually nonprofits, and that'll get you the hands-on experience, whether it be within the research and lab side of things, civil engineering, volunteer service, recreation, and I believe some of them are involving fire management now. And so I highly recommend everyone checking out those opportunities to get involved with that, because you do get paid, you do get a housing stipend, you do get funds for professional development opportunities, so you can travel and do training. Some of them will be on the ground, some will be virtual. So there's a huge array of possibilities and different types of opportunities. So I highly recommend that.
I was just going to add on that and sorry I missed this morning, so I don't know exactly which ones you all heard about, but we also have built, and speaking for the Southern region, which is Region 8, we have built a lot of programs with AmeriCorps partners, and I know other regions have been doing that too. And so sometimes you might not want to be on your own in an internship, but our AmeriCorps partners have started working with us to develop crews. And so you have a crew of people that you'll be assigned to, and most of them still get the PLC certificate at the end of their time period. And these crew models, they'll be, some of them, we do strive for local crew models. So you could still live on, like, we had one this right now, actually, that the individuals still live here on their reservation lands, but they meet at a local spot and then they travel to the work site. They do camp out sometimes. Some of the crews might be camped out the whole time. Some of them might be transporting back and forth each day, but those are really good opportunities for you, not only getting your PLC cert, but also getting in-depth experience in exactly what that job looks like. Right now, we do heritage crews, we do land management crews. Like Latasha said, we have fire crews and timber crews. So anything that you're, especially if it has a field component to it, we are trying to get students and young people those experiences ahead of time. And we've also had a lot of luck with even high school students coming out and joining a crew, and then they go into actually majoring in that field of study. And so if you have younger relatives and such, I'm always trying to pave a smoother path for those that come after us. And so if you have younger ones that are interested and want that experience, encourage them to look for those. Any of those core partners, it's phenomenal what they get to do. And you still get the same benefits, the stipends, educational grants, all those kind of things. So again, they exist, but like Marley mentioned, you have to be able to put in the work yourself and go after those.
Learn how to navigate USA jobs and format your resume with all those keywords. Have someone look over your resume. Do some mock interviews. I know they might feel corny, but they help. You never know what kind of random question you might get asked, whether it be really about the whole job and describing yourself, or how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich, all that stuff. They throw out some weird ones sometimes, just to try to catch you off guard, I think. And I know for one intern that we hired, he was a previous hire, so we knew he was capable and smart and could do the work. But when we interviewed him again for the second summer internship, we kind of had to. He didn't add any. He was going to skip over some relevant good experience that he did with like construction management, and we kind of had to peel it out of him by asking him some questions. And if we didn't, then that would have been a lot of good experience that we wouldn't have known about. And so just remember to try to highlight your strengths. I know it's not always the most comfortable, at least I know for me, to try to talk about myself in that way, but it's competitive out there.
Maybe I'll add in one more comment here about how students can try out the agency, just to mention that we will be at the ACES National Conference. We'll have a Forest Service booth there. So if any of you are planning to attend the ACES conference in October, our booth number is 575, and we will be so glad to see you. We'll have Smokey the Bear walking around the career fair. And then also just a point to maybe, not only reach out to maybe a local district, but I know that there's a list of our regional tribal relations program managers, and they're really excellent too, with just kind of pointing you to the right resources or to points of contact and folks within their region that might be interested in having you tag along for the day. Whether not that's with like an LEO officer and going out in the forest and doing sort of more the law enforcement side, or tagging along with a wildlife biologist on the district and doing wildlife stuff, or forestry, fire, all these things. So reach out to those regional tribal relations program managers, and I think that they could also help kind of steer you down the path that you might be interested in trying out.
Awesome. So we have one more question, and it's just a reminder to folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to toss them in the chat as well. We may have some time at the end. But this last one is also kind of around the concept of resources and professional development. So as you kind of think about your career and reflect your time in the Forest Service, what professional development resources are available? And I'll add one more thing to this. Marley, you were talking before about the concept of finding community and kind of finding that belonging within college. So I'll add that to this question. Where have you felt belonging in the Forest Service, and where have you received professional development in the Forest Service?
I'll start. So there's plenty of opportunities in this agency for professional development. When I first got here, I made it very clear to my supervisor, that this was an exchange, and that even though I have the skill set for this permanent position, I need to get something out of it as well. And I made that a point. Part of that was professional development and outreach and education, and being able to establish a program here on the district that would support Indigenous and local youth growth and connection to the agency and access to these resources. And another thing was professional development and leadership. So some of the programs that I've gotten involved with and that I have vocalized that I need to be involved with is the program is called This Is Who We Are. It's the agency's diversity and inclusion initiative to address some of the issues, the historical and cultural growth that the agency needs, and is under the development of taking seriously. And it's had a long journey to get up to this point, but it still is in the process of addressing some of these more serious issues that the agency has, while allowing space for us as employees in the agency to directly address that. And whether that's cross-region, cross-forest, or cross-nationally, us all to connect and discuss those issues and to make each other aware of the issues that we each face, whether you've had a great time in the agency or have had some difficulties or not so great of a time in the agency. Other professional development and leadership trainings and opportunities that I've had. I know that we're going to have a work environment summit here in Albuquerque for the region. And when I heard about that, I had a colleague basically nominate me because of my passions. I'm pretty vocal about what I'm passionate about here, what I stand for, especially when it comes to equity and inclusion and empathy and all these things. So he name dropped me to the regional forester and the forest supervisor, and now I am the one of two Santa Fe representatives to go and talk about how we can improve work environment status and have real conversations and really work towards developing programs that are going to support the employees all through the agency. Working here on the district, I've had a lot of insight into where the gaps are and where we need support and where we are kind of shorthanded in the agency. So I'm using that space to lead from where I'm at. There's plenty of other opportunities too, but those are the ones that I'm involved with. And I guess what I want you to get out of this is any position you obtain in this agency, you can adapt it and work it towards your passions as well. Even if you did not think that this is the path you were going to take even within this agency. Always vocalize your passions to your supervisors. And if your supervisor doesn't hear you, you move up to the next level. And you're continually fighting for what you see and envision your job to be, while also exchanging your skill set and resources to the agency and to the bigger picture. I think we get lost in the weeds sometimes and forget that this is an exchange, and it's always an exchange. We are exchanging our work and our energy for that professional development, those benefits, a paycheck, and that knowledge that this agency has, and access to resources because we know where this agency stands. So always keep that in mind when you're applying for jobs.
I think she captured it pretty awesome. Like just the communication piece alone is a huge part of your professional development. Like being able to advocate for yourself. Like, and I'm not saying do it all bullying it either, but just being open with what your desires are. Like I told you in the beginning that I did my master's while I was a full-time employee. A lot of the projects that I was exploring in school doubled as work projects. And so, but that was only successful because my direct supervisor was invested in what I was looking at, what I was doing, and designing those projects with me. And also, our agency was once very specialized. You had very specialized positions that you stayed in. Now it's much more integrated. So if there's another field that you're really interested in, talk to your supervisor, talk to that supervisor and see, like, can I do some cross training? Especially like everybody thinks of fire, of course, like it's a all hands on deck field that everybody contributes to. All the other resource areas can be the same. I've seen it work on other districts before. So um, you've got to have those open communications. So if that's something that's really interesting or important to you, go after it. So.
I guess one quick thing that I didn't quite hear, definitely all on par with Krista and Marley, details. Details in the agency have been super helpful for me. It's pretty much a temporary time frame where you get to jump out of your current position into something else. For me, last year, I was able to go from a district level to a forest level as a forest recreation assistant program manager. So opened my eyes to a bigger platform of management within the recreation program. And then this past year, I actually was able to do another detail into the Washington office, so a national level into the Civilian Climate Corps program, which got me super involved more with climate change, youth engagement, tribal relations, and which actually honestly led me to this job right here, right now. So just another thing to add in.
Those are excellent points. Maybe I'll just highlight what I put in the chat. And sorry, the order ended up being funky in there, but I will mention two of those resources I listed. The Intertribal Timber Council offers scholarships for Native students in natural resources. There's, like I said, two, the Truman Picard, and then the other one is a research one, and that one's funded by the Forest Service. And then also we have our Native Peoples Wildlife Management Working Group of the Wildlife Society. So I posted that link in there too. But I did notice somebody had their hand raised, so I didn't know if we wanted to go to that.
Yes, Sylvia, go for it. Sylvia Staples, we see your hand is up, please. There we are.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for participating and sharing all of your experiences. It's really great to hear all the different pathways into the agency. One quick question that's kind of a different, from a different perspective. What type of advice would you give our Forest Service recruiters or some of our partners or cooperators that may be recruiting from the Indigenous communities and schools? What type of advice would you give them?
And this is just personal advice, like Sylvia, I think you and I've had this conversation before, but sometimes within our agency, it's a great thing to see when you have somebody come into the agency and then in their internship, they're allowed to move around and gain different experiences. That's awesome. And I commend those that are able to do it. For at least the tribes that I work with the most, it's hard for people to truly leave home. When they go to work for the agency, they still want to be connected to their homelands because it's more than just a sense of place for them. It's part of who they are and those resources that they've been taught to care for all their life. And if you disconnect them for too long, some believe that their health or their mental health will also suffer because of that. And so keeping that in mind, that to look for opportunities, especially for hiring locally, to go to those communities. And a lot of it, I know it's hard to go and travel during COVID times and such, but for what's worked for us is when we engage people, like with the tribal YCC program, we went to them and did a hiring event on their tribal lands and talked to the parents in person. And gave them assurance for what their kids were going to be doing for the summer and such. And that made a huge impact on the program compared to others that we've tried to engage from afar. It's, again, putting ourselves as an agency in a place that's reassuring them or reassuring the tribal people that this is really a benefit for you all. This is how we want to benefit you, but also paying attention to those tribal customs and ideals and such.
Anyone else on Sylvia's question?
Yeah, I'll second that. Just because when it comes to communicating with tribal communities, each one communicates differently. And yet we as an agency sometimes struggle to go to those communities and say, what can we do for you to best suit the needs of your community? And so when, as a recruiter, I would encourage you to invest a lot of time into the communities, reaching out, understanding how to communicate with them. You're going to have to do a lot of homework to really understand where to meet the community where they need to be met. I know personally, I have a leg up because I'm an Indigenous person, and yet I'm an Indigenous person through the coconut wire. So I've had to do a lot of homework on my continental brothers and sisters and family members here to understand, one, how they communicate, where I would stand in that community, and also reassure them that I'm investing in not only them today, but their Indigenous youth of tomorrow. And I make sure that every agreement or every interaction I have with them is based in, this is for the long haul. This is for longevity. As long as I sit in this position, I will do my best to work with you and with your communities. And I'm doing the work now to guarantee that your community will have access not only to their ancestral lands and resources, but also have opportunity here in this space and agency, because we need your voices to better manage these lands. So making sure that you're getting that message across and being genuine and honest with them. You know, the agency is here. I'm not sure if we can provide this, but I'm doing the work to make sure that on my end, you're covered. And making sure that we as this individuals of privilege are making sure that we are upfront with those opportunities, and we're doing that legwork to meet them where they're at. So I would encourage you to do that work. It's a lot of extra work on you. It's completely worth it at the end of the day. And it's the ethical and empathetic thing to do as well.
Cody, did you have something on that one?
Yeah, just learning about what other options there are as far as some partner organizations for those internships or experiences. I know even if a internship or position isn't on USA Jobs, I know of at least 2 organizations in Alaska where the partnership organization will pay the wage or salary of the internship, and they just need like the federal partner to provide the experience and the supervision for the job or the project. So, you know, just knowing that there are other ways to get people out and experience what we can do.
This is Kay with the Nez Tribe. So that other resource would be Indian employment and training programs. A number of organizations, whether you're in the urban city or on a reservation, have what we call monies from the Department of Labor called Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. In that legislation, there's a section of law for Indian and Native American programs. Then the other one would be the U.S. Department of Education through the Carl D. Perkins Act, career technical education programs. There are Native grantees across the country that have that type of money where we can pay for internships with like the Forest Service or USDA. So there are resources, yes.
Yeah, Kay, could you please drop that information in the chat if you have access to it? That'd be wonderful.
Yes, I will, and I'm thinking of others too. I mean, you have like tribal TANF programs with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Sorry, I need to turn. There's a number of programs. I'll put them in the chat for you. And they're just good resources to have. Even the states have what we call that WIOA money, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Tribes and states have what we call vocational rehabilitation programs that'll do the same thing. So there's a number of them. Thank you.
No, thank you, Kay, for the resources. And if anybody else has any other resources, any other comments, questions, concerns, please feel free to drop them in the chat. But kind of the last question to kind of begin to close us out. As you kind of reflect back to the time when you were transitioning out of college, what very brief advice would you give your younger self or that person? That'll be our last question, and then I think we can wrap up.
Can I start with this one? I'll mention, I wish I had somebody like Marley alongside with me, because I wish I could have stood up for myself a little bit better, because so after I finished my bachelor's, I went on for my master's, and that's when I took my first job, and it was in a research station. So talk about Native people being underrepresented. I mean, I was literally the only one across the whole station and the whole Southern Research Station. And then to this day, we still only have 2 federally enrolled tribal members working in R&D doing research. So it's just, we're so underrepresented. And so not only being like a grad student, like coming into a new work environment, but feeling like, man, my values are really clashing with a lot of these other non-native scientists. Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I couldn't quite make that step to really like say how I felt about the things that we were studying and bring my values like to the table and to the way that we were conducting research and how we were interacting with tribes. So I wish I had somebody like Marley there, because man, every time you speak, Marley, you're just like incredible and very motivating. So I guess I wish my younger self could have been a little bit more like standing up for our values. But I think that really is something that's starting to change in the agency. And I am seeing it within research and development. And it's coming out within White House guidance on how we need to incorporate TEK into our federal decision making. So it's truly something that is like, we're at this cusp now where it's going to be okay for us to voice our opinions. So maybe on a positive note, that's what I'll end with. And thanks again for everybody for coordinating this.
I think or exactly what Sarah said. Like I love Marley's passion for advocating for others. And I think I would tell my younger self, like, don't be afraid when you get thrust into those positions. Like, I can't tell you how many times that I had to explain to my coworkers, like, why I didn't want to cut a certain type of tree because I worked in timber for a while, or what this bird means to my people, like why I need to go home at this time because I'm expecting bad news, those kind of things. And being that person who shared that TEK, whether it's in story form or very straightforward, but that's happened to me. And now looking back on it, I remember being afraid of more the ridicule or people being skeptic of what I was saying. But I have had so many great opportunities and experiences because of that willingness to share. And so I think that'd be the only thing that I would go back and tell my younger self, like, embrace it. Don't be afraid. Because once I did embrace it, it's become part of the reason I feel that my career has been successful and getting into the positions I'm at now, because of being able to share those stories with others. But yeah, same thing for everyone. Share your stories and don't be afraid of sharing it with others.
I can go next unless Cody has something. But pretty much along the same lines, I think mine's obviously for sure everything exact down to the T. For me, it would be telling myself to just talk more, to speak up more. Because when I first started out with the agency, I was really quiet. And as again, for most Indigenous folks, we do listen first, and like we want to absorb things and offer our comments afterwards. And so for me, that was it. Like I would listen, learn, keep it in. And I wouldn't really want to speak or comment on anything, mainly because like maybe my opinion doesn't really have much value. Like I'm new to the agency, I'm just an intern. So I don't have much input to provide, but the more and more years and experiences I've had throughout projects, I've learned like, oh yeah, like a small comment of, well, maybe we could do this project this way, added like so much more value than I ever expected it would. So I feel that I would tell myself to speak up a lot more, just in general, on anything and everything.
I'll say one more thing before, and I appreciate everybody in this space. Your voices are powerful and you are powerful, and it's why the agency is making the changes they are. It's because you all are doing that fight. I have a little thing here, and this is what I would tell anybody coming into the agency, no matter what cultural body of experience that you represent. Know your worth and fight for the vision that you have for your position and your truth. I know that I have brought endless amounts of knowledge to my district in regard to the insights that I have and how I've applied the life experiences that I have obtained in my life. And I know this because I understand who I am as a diplomatic warrior in this space. And when you understand the importance of the work you do and the things that you add into this world, you can lead from where you're at and you can solidify a seat for ourselves as well as the people, the individuals who come after us, and the voices of our ancestors that have been ignored. You solidify a seat at that table, and it can't be ignored after that. We are here and we're doing that work. So know your worth and fight for it, because that's what's going to give you the power to not only make the necessary changes that are needed in this space, but also for those that are connected to this space. We impact so many people outside of this agency who may not have direct ties into the agency, and we owe them that, right? So just know that. And always, when you start doubting yourself, just continually repeat it. You are worth more than sometimes the position can offer, and yet this position might get you to that next step where you need to be. So always keep that in mind.
Yes, I agree. Mine is also going to be learn and accept your worth, because that's something that I struggle with, is the fear of inadequacy. And so knowing that I'm capable, but not always knowing knowing that I am adequate is something I struggle with. And so what I've found that I think, or inadvertently found, that kind of helps sometimes is finding some of the people, whether it be at work or elsewhere, that I can maybe confide in sometimes to check in, or then I just and sharing some thoughts and feelings and stories, and then it becomes a nice session of people telling me how proud of me they are, and it feels good. So finding some of that community at work and outside of work, I think, is really important.
Awesome. With that, we will wrap up this portion of the program. Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience. Everybody, please enjoy the rest of your day.
Final thoughts.